July 26, 2012, 5 days in Washington, D.C. for the Taking Action for Animals Conference. Dear Taking Action for Animals Conference speakers, thank you again for agreeing to speak at Taking Action for Animals. Taking Action for Animals is less than a month away. To help you prepare for your arrival at TAFA, we want to review a few frequently asked questions to make your experience as a speaker a great one. And it gives the location for the Marriott Wardman Park Hotel, what to do when you're checking in as far as going to the lobby and getting your badge, and a ribbon to identify you as a speaker, drink and meal tickets, a welcome bag with show guide and other materials, and additional speaker information. It talks about the schedule that can be found inside the bag and the contact information for the people handling the show. And then it says July 2012, Carole presented this at the Taking Action for Animals conference in Washington, D.C. One person can be a catalyst for change. If you are sitting in this audience, you might be the kind of person who has the passion to overcome the impossible in order to help save thousands or millions of animals. Rose Church is one of those people. How many of you have heard about Tony the tiger, who has been kept at a Louisiana truck stop for the past decade? Of course, everybody has heard of that. How many of you have heard of or recognize Ian Somerhalder from the Vampire Diaries? Yeah, just about everybody there, too. Rose Church is a pro bono attorney for the Ian Somerhalder Foundation, and she wanted to get Ian involved in freeing Tony the tiger. Ian has 2.3 million followers on Twitter, and she thought that getting him to tweet about Tony might help raise awareness about Tony the truck stop tiger. She contacted me to ask what Ian could ask his followers to do. Even though we get more complaints about Tony than any other single situation and have been working to free him for the past decade, we had exhausted our ability to do anything. We had hired the tiger a lawyer and had shown up with plenty of supporters to testify, but it had become obvious that the state of Louisiana was not going to do anything. USDA has revoked the license to display the tiger, but that rarely seems to stop exhibitors from exhibiting. The Animal Legal Defense Fund had continued the fight in the only venue left, which was the legal system. Court cases wind their way through the system like a river of molasses, so there wasn't much anyone could do. It seemed like the whole world already knew about Tony, so having Ian tweet his audience didn't seem like a terribly productive thing to do. If we had the help of a celebrity, we told Rose that we could make a far greater impact for thousands of tigers like Tony by educating his fan base about the issue that causes so many tigers and other big cats to end up being bred, exploited, and discarded. The underlying cause for almost all of the suffering is cub petting. I explained to Rose that it was big business in the U.S. for breeders to charge the public to pet or pose with big cat cubs. One claims to have made $23,000 in a single weekend at a mall, charging people to have interaction with cubs and or have their photos made with the cubs. The breeders and the dealers were doing these pay-to-play sessions with older lions and tigers up until the death of a high school student named Haley Hildebrand. Thanks to pressure from the media and then the public, the USDA issued an FAQ sheet suggesting that cubs under 8 weeks should not be used this way. In a separate appellate court case, the judge ruled that cubs over the age of 12 weeks were too dangerous for such interaction. The unintended result was creating a loophole whereby breeders could still charge customers to touch cubs who were between 8 and 12 weeks old. That resulted in massive breeding in order to have profitable cubs to use. Since their shelf life was only 4 weeks, breeders decided to produce lion and tiger cubs every month so that they would always have legal age cubs to use. Rose could hardly believe her ears. First of all, she had never seen these mall exhibits where tiger breeders set up shop and offer cubs as photo props all day over a 4-day weekend. Second, she couldn't believe that USDA hadn't done something to close that 4-week window that they had created. It can be anything from fixing a broken toy to curing some social ill. Have you ever had one of those moments when you see a situation and think to yourself, I can fix this? That was Rose's moment. She said to herself, I can do something about this. Rose figured there are lots of animal protection groups out there, and if they all work together, they could fix this thing. But she doubted that anyone would listen to her if she made the suggestion that they do so. She took the information to her professor from law school, Diane Sullivan, because she knew that Dean Sullivan had her own animal law television show and a lot of clout in the animal protection community. She figured that if Dean Sullivan were to ask the big animal groups to come together, that it might actually happen. Rose asked me who the big players are that care about tigers. That was an easy question because I had been part of a team of more than 40 such organizations who worked together as the International Tiger Coalition. The ITC had been formed primarily to end tiger farming in China, but time and again the hurdle was that China would resist our suggestions by pointing out the fact that the U.S. doesn't even know how many tigers we have, nor where they are, nor how they're being housed. I gave her the names and contact info for all of the people I felt had been most involved in the International Tiger Coalition who could work well together. Rose contacted the International Fund for Animal Welfare and went over the list to get further input on who would be willing to work together on the tiger issue. The result was a roundtable meeting in D.C. at IFAW in July. I think it was on the 25th of 2011. At the table were the International Fund for Animal Welfare, the Humane Society of the United States, Born Free, the World Wildlife Fund, the Animal Legal Defense Fund, the Wildcat Conservation Legal Aid Society, World Council for Animal Rights, the Dean of the Massachusetts School of Law, Ian Somerhalder Foundation, the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, and Big Cat Rescue. Combined, we represent more than 18 million supporters. I have been a part of other animal welfare coalitions, but this group has worked better together than anything I've seen before. The meeting was hugely successful, and we got to the root of the tiger problem: cub petting. In your conference bag, you will find a 4-page summary of the tiger handling crisis. There is another page of citations used for the document that we provide online at bigcatlaws.com. What the group concluded was that we can't save wild tigers as long as there is such unregulated trade in captive tigers who provide a legal smokescreen for illegal activities such as poaching. China has made the argument that they should be allowed to farm tigers for their parts to fill the demand, but there will always be a demand for the real tiger, the wild tiger, and expanding the market through tiger farms will only result in them being exterminated more quickly in the wild. Right now, there are more tigers in backyard cages in America than are left in the wild. It is thought that there are less than 3,200 tigers left in the wild, and at last count by USDA, there were about 5,000 tigers in USDA facilities. That was from 2004. Only about 200 of those are AZA-accredited zoos, so the rest are in roadside zoos, circus acts, and backyards. And that is just the ones who voluntarily reported and who hold USDA licenses. For those who are not licensed by USDA, the people who own them as pets, there's been no census done. As the group looked into the situation in the U.S., it became apparent that the number one cause for so many tigers to end up in deplorable conditions was the very lucrative cub petting industry. 2 factors made this abuse possible. Back in the 1980s, white tigers became all the rage. White tigers would sell for $60,000 because the public was so enamored with seeing this freak of nature. What the zoos kept quiet was the fact that the only way to create that white coat was through purposely inbreeding, father to daughter, mother to son, and brother to sister. Over time, the cubs became more and more genetically impaired, suffering from club feet, open spines, crossed eyes, and badly formed teeth and bones. Before long, the Bengal tigers were so inbred that they were no longer producing cubs, or the cubs were being born dead. But the public demanded to see white tigers, so the zoos started hybridizing Bengal tigers and Siberian tigers to continue the inbreeding a few generations more. So many zoos and backyard breeders were crossbreeding tigers that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service decided it wasn't worth their time to process the captive bred wildlife permits that are required for endangered species, so they created the generic tiger loophole. What this did was allowed zoos and private owners to breed non-purebred tigers with no oversight, and the tiger population exploded in the U.S. The other factor that made it so easy for tigers to be bred and used as photo and petting props was that even though USDA had inadvertently created a 4-week window between 8 and 12 weeks when cubs could be petted by the public, they had no way to enforce it because they do not require any sort of registration of tigers and rely almost entirely on what the tiger owner tells them as the age of the cub or why the cub was taken from their mother. The same person who claims to make over $20,000 in a good weekend at the mall had 23 tiger cubs die over the span of just a little over a year. But to date, the USDA has done nothing about it. And I was writing that in 2012, and to this date, 2021, that's still the case. So the coalition decided on a 3-pronged approach to ending the abuse of tigers. Close the generic tiger loophole at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, ask USDA to close the 4-week window of cub petting, a federal bill that ends the breeding and trade of big cats outside of AZA-accredited zoos. Only a year has passed since one person arranged for a bunch of animal protection groups to work on this, and we have good news so far. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has put the suggestion of closing the generic tiger exemption out on the Federal Register for public comment, and more than 14,000 have commented in favor of doing so. The rule hasn't been made final, but the government moves slowly. We met with USDA, presented the cub handling crisis flyer you have, along with all of the citations and the concurrence of 20 zoo vets who agree that cub petting should be banned. Unfortunately, the USDA has taken the position that they do not have the power to close the window. They made it, they should be able to close it, but they are unwilling. So we are still working on that one. Again, I said this in 2012, and we are still working on this in 2021. For the most part, their attitude seems to be that they don't think it's a big enough problem because they don't hear about it much. With your help, we can fix that. And today, you can still help us fix that at bigcatact.com.